G'day guys, Mark here. Another little chat that I want to have with folks in the ways of things that I sort of have to say that I think are relevant for the like-minded of us to think about and share and maybe try and be part of the fix to the issues that our world faces. And largely this carries on from the conversation of personal responsibility. That we all should wear more of it, we should encourage it, and we should teach it. It should be more the focus of our world, less asking our governments to do stuff and more being socially responsible, personally responsible, which is whether that's community groups or church groups or actually the way the whole thing should be run. We should all be accepting the consequences of actions and personally responsible for the decisions we make. When this one goes into something that is a really insidious and I suppose too the problem and a little bit the way to see it, the way to fix it, and that is under the brackets of history. We're seeing now, and this has been at it forever. There's an old saying that says that the history is written by the victor. So in other words, the history tends to get the people, the conqueror gets to write the history, so tends to be more biased towards what they did rather than what the other side did. And I suppose that's true. We know that's true to some degree or another. But there's also generally been scholars, I suppose in all senses to the largest degree, unless there is a little bit like what's happening at the moment where people try and remove history, then the history's still there. It just isn't necessarily shared as much as it should be. And the importance to this, I suppose I would say, above all else, is the really, really obvious that any sentient or being with a brain knows that unless you learn by your mistakes, then you're only doomed to repeat that again. So that is the nature of history. That is its real value. If we look back at what really happened, then we can judge things with an honest part, then we know what was right or what was wrong and the consequences of it. Regardless of what we thought what we were trying to do, the consequences are what actually happened, and that's how we learn. To the largest degree, judging, be it missionaries or be it whatever the entity or individual or government or organisation, whatever they ended up doing, is the judge of the history will judge them if it's recorded properly. But it doesn't mean their intent was any more positive, progressive, proactive or righteous than the people who are now fighting against them. So I suppose without going on too much about that sort of stuff there, yes, we are seeing all over the world where people are individuals and governments and organisations trying to rewrite history, just simply through claiming different bits and pieces, books that are written, fantasy books that are written and then taken into schools and universities as history, trends to try and prove the victimhood of different situations, then taken on and taken as fact. And this comes in all sorts of ways, whether it's in schools or it's in media or it's in Hollywood or all the places that it normally exists. But it is about rewriting history. And I suppose what I want to say there is the important thing for all humanity, but those of us that are really thinking about this, is to don't take for granted what you've been told. Largely the history of humans in the last couple of hundred years at least anyway, and maybe last 1,000 years, was recorded and was largely what was told to us as younger people. But more and more so that is not being taught, nor and more so whether that's Australian history or that's American history or that's English history or that's Greek history or whatever it is. More and more the details are left out and only the bits that suit the modern argument are being put back in. So you may know already more than a lot of what you hear already, but there is stuff still out there, and actually wanting to share that and wanting to gain each other's knowledge about that, rather than listening to the big talking points of the media, rather than listening to listen, 200,000 years ago this existed. No one knows what happened 200,000 years ago, regardless of it being a piece, an artifact, painting, a story, regardless that we don't know what actually happened. We piece together things by even our science, which is now a bit more of a bought thing rather than an actual scientific thing, but even our science changes its mind on what happened all the time with another piece of information. Now, while they are staying honest and true and don't have an agenda, then okay, that can work for us, but we have to keep in mind that that isn't necessarily what's happening. There are other voices that are being silenced. So I'm saying, in a real sense, be as vigilant as you can. It is worthwhile not only knowing, but it's also worthwhile sharing what you know, whether it's a book, whether it's a video, whether it's an article, whatever it is, to share that, not just amongst the like-minded, but to share that. And I suppose that moves into the next bit of the conversation that I would like to say, is to also be brave enough to share that with the people that don't want to hear. And to, when you hear one piece of information that's being pushed, to calmly and rationally, not even necessarily point out that that is wrong, but although that may be the case, but to definitely put forward what is right, and to share that with, yes, sometimes the people that don't listen. And in that is something that actually goes into everything that I feel that we have to, as the thinking side, the conservative side, the logical side, have to put forward as to, in all senses, whether that's about history, or that's about gender, or that's about whatever thing that is being pushed, is because it's said a lot of times doesn't make it real. There is a form of psychosis that's spoken about, that if something is said enough time, then the average person will believe it because it's been said enough times. That seems unbeatable because we're all sort of only average, and it is said so many times. How can you stop help from believing it? Because you're smarter than that, because you do know, and you are talking about what's real, and you do understand that the media, that the schools, that the universities, that the people that go to the schools and universities, although they may be very good people, they are being brainwashed. So their brainwashing comes back out onto you or onto your crowds because they've been to university, they should know, and will know that's not right. They know something, it doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean they don't think it's right, and it's certainly not something to attack people about. But to say this in a fashion where you're calm and focused, and that's, I suppose, the other bit of this conversation, in a real sense, is in sharing with the like-minded people to start off with, whether it's the people at your club, or there are people at your group, or they're just the people that they're just mates, but to not only talk about these things, and I mean talk about, I don't mean rant about them, I mean talk about these things, but to also work out in a calm fashion, whether that's in a small group or a large group, but to work out how to say these things. What is the right rebuttal to that comment? What is the right rebuttal to what is a woman? What is the right rebuttal to climate change? What is the right rebuttal to these things? Now, in a lot of cases, it isn't just the case that it's wrong, it's a case of it's being interpreted incorrectly. It isn't a case of they're all terrible people and they need to be taught different ways. No, this is largely, like I said, there is on the other side of the fence, there is this thing going on. There is a constant brainwashing. There is a constant repetition or repeating of terms that they start to use. In other words, their language is being taught to them by that same mechanism in a far bigger scale. The only way to really fight that and stand for what you truly believe in is to do a bit of the same. You can't fight a guerrilla warfare while you're all standing in line with your rifles pointing in the air. You actually have to stoop a little bit to their level, or think in their way, is a better way of putting it, I suppose. But to have general conversations that are then working out the way to say things. You don't want to antagonize people as much as they may be antagonistic, as much as they may be pushing your buttons. That's for the exact reason that you react that way, and then you look like the crazy one. Even though they're saying the crazy things, you look like the crazy ones. So the calmer you are, and the more rational you are, and the more thought has been put into the reply or the question or the statement, that it's done in a smooth fashion that makes sense, that has calmness, but has not just the backing of logic and common sense, because that doesn't always work, but you also know it has the backing of your group and the people that think like you. So then you're using words that make sense. You're using a rhetoric that makes sense, and it has the backing of those, of like I said, however large your group is. And that's what gives you confidence. A lot of people haven't thought about this, but those crazy things that are said by those people that don't make any sense, how do they pull it off with a straight face? Well, because they know all the other people like them would say exactly the same thing. So they're not confident in being right, they're confident in saying what is right for their group. So we can have two things on our side. We can be confident on being right, but we also can be confident in saying what is right for our group. I know you're probably just like me and you don't want to talk about this sort of stuff, but it is important to be able to, it's not going to go away. There are quiet moments, there are noisy moments, but there is a constant push on the other side of things in all levels, in both sides of government. Don't think that the other side is better in all cases. There are a few diamonds in the rough that are really worthwhile, and standing for them is important, but that doesn't mean they are on one side of the political, well, as people say, left and right wings of the same bird. And that, to the largest degree, is the truth of that situation. So this is much more, as I've said, government, we don't want them in charge so much. We want the people to do this. The people need to step up. We need to be part of making the people better. And that doesn't stop at just our own personal responsibility. That also pushes forward to where we're prepared to risk a little, but be smart about it to actually help the rest come to our side. Impossible, I get it. But hey, if you really think it's completely impossible, you've already given up. Anyway, guys, thank you for checking in. We'll catch you next time.